Like the Bugs Bunny countdown.
You're all good.
Good evening, Springfield. Welcome to the April 12th, 2021 Township of Springfield Planning Board. Adequate notice has been given in accordance with the Sunshine Laws. Notice was published official newspaper of the Township of Springfield for 2021 and posted on the Annex Building January 11, 2021. Let's do a flag of the United States of America and to the republic
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Thank you, Apu.
Committeeman Rich Huber,
Present.
Mr. David Barnett,
I'm here.
Mr. Aaron Lawfer,
Here.
Mr. Brian Brendel,
Here.
Ms. Marissa Ruggiero is absent. Mr. Thomas Lopes is absent. Mr. Scott Wishna,
He's saying here.
yes, I see Mr. Scott Wishner. I can't hear him, but I can see him.
Fix your audio. We can't hear you. Perfect. Okay, so we added some minutes. I'm sure that everyone had the opportunity. All in favor?
He's sitting right next to me.
Okay, so let's start with him. Good.
Okay, so first, Mr. Cohen, so
If you want me to call him, I can have him clarify that if you're satisfied with what I said. Brian, is he available? Ben, can I proceed with Ben?
please.
Absolutely, counsel.
And what is your position with Hobby Lobby? Those who store the best of all the other possibilities.
Christmas trees, if not another more.
Do they go to the customers directly from the container?
It'll come.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
And your storage facility that you have right now cannot accommodate that? Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And is it important for your operations to have these containers? Is that correct?
It's essential for them. Yes.
Okay. Are these containers for your access and for your use of those containers? Is that correct? And you access them through what? There's a door in the back?
Okay,
Good.
okay. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Our last Tuesday morning, I did electrical subcode official who's there on Tuesdays. And he basically dug out the plans from the initial fit out of the building. And he confirmed that those were not fire doors there. They were panic alarmed. So if somebody steals something, the staff would know, but it does not alert the fire department or anything like that. We also at that time reconfirmed with the storage contingent, did have on the Google Drive for them. They were asked to look at the further comment at this time. We did try to or offer to word that it's fairly non-open, stacks of several doors out the back.
Chief's discussion about not being a fire door or anything like that, or any concerns?
With the circulation, the placement of anybody exited the door that was testified to, it's not going to set off a fire alarm, and most likely for
Determined with,
long, but that's my
Fantastic business. I would tell you that right now,
For a year, see where it is. It's a
mayor's.
Sharon.
Oh, Sharon, okay, then Aaron.
I don't have any comment.
Aaron.
I agree also stated right at the beginning that
I can give a little more information on that.
Well,
Go
Jay, Mr. Scott, on that, why wasn't anticipated?
Whoever wants.
Yeah, I mean, this is Matt. I'm the real estate person that did the deal from
Yeah.
the beginning that we talked
All right,
about.
well then,
Who he?
At Avnet. I know his screen says,
Himself, and I'm saying you're not.
yeah, but no.
planner on behalf of the board to hear.
Professional engineer, land surveyor, and
Okay, and you regularly appear before boards, provide.
He's looking to place 3 containers on, I think, is it the west side of the building? Okay.
of the site.
Okay, and the size of those containers I saw have to do with significant or de minimis, correct?
Mr. Hughes, we would all be in favor to say that this is specific needs of Hobby Lobby makes sense. The only other thing that Mr. Cohen and I was going to bring up as of any condition of approval if the board acts favorable is Hobby Lobby isn't the owner. If they decide to leave tomorrow, who's going to take them away? I'd like a letter sent to our counsel, Mr. Keynes, acknowledging from the property owner that within 30 days of Hobby Lobby leaving, if Hobby Lobby doesn't move it, they need to remove the
Yeah, well, the landlord absolutely approved everything, and he's trying to help us.
Yep.
So I don't think he would have any objection.
Yeah, I just would like a letter to the Board of Council that satisfies him that the landlord would remove the containers when Hobby Lobby leaves, if Hobby Lobby doesn't remove them. So I just don't want them sitting there for 6 months after the fact if Hobby Lobby isn't there. So you can work out that mechanism to satisfy our board attorney if that acts favorable. So I'm going to go put the board, if any questions, then I'm going to open up to the public and then we can take some action. Mayor Weber?
Mr. Cohen, I could not have put it better. You're like Chairman Tiger said, your statements were right on the money. I can tell you, me as mayor of the Township of Springfield, love having Hobby Lobby here, whatever I have to do to help them stay in business and keep these people employed and keep a successful business there for a lot of years I'm with. So you got it.
Mr. Brendel?
I echo Mayor Weber's thoughts. To me, keeping any business in town right now is a good thing, especially in the retail environment. So I'm good. I do just agree, Chairman Tiger, to add the condition that it goes with Hobby Lobby if they leave.
Yes, that we should make sure that it's there.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Sharon Kessel?
Nothing to add to what you've already said.
Perfect. Mr. Huber or Mayor?
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Mr. Schwartz?
I will reserve my comments until we hear from the public. I'm curious if anyone in the public has a voice on this.
Sure. I'm going through the next person. Mr. Wishna?
I have no further comments.
Mr. Barnett?
Overall, I'm fine with this now. I was sort of less concerned about who's coming and going and the frequency of them coming and going than the appearance, the space that the containers would be taking up outside. And I think I'm satisfied with that. While Ben Crary, the regional manager, is on, if you could maybe pay a little bit of attention to the parking lot. A few times I had been there, I just noticed a lot of trash around, especially towards the ends of the parking lot because the wind blows stuff. But I think the town would certainly appreciate it if we can get someone out there just to pick up some of that stuff that blows all over.
Will do.
I'm fine.
Perfect. Aaron?
I'm in complete agreement with the mayor. I don't think this is the time that we should we should try to not let things progress because of gotcha questions. So I definitely support any business that wants to thrive in Springfield.
Perfect. Okay, so at this time, actually, Mr. Disco, anything further? No, Mr. Hughes, anything further? You could shake your head if you.
Nothing further.
Nothing further. Okay. Apu, at this time, I'm going to open it up to the public. If any of the participants wants to raise their hand, and we'll pull you into the public. I think there's a question about application 2, and that we will take around 7:15 when we open it up to the public on that application. But anything on this application regarding Hobby Lobby?
Seeing none at this time.
Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close this matter to the public and go back to the board and ask Mr. Schwartz if there's any additional comments.
I guess I'll get it off my chest now. Mr. Cohen in his closing statement used the phrase consistent testimony that there's a need for the containers. And I'm not buying it. That statement's not true. Between the 2 witnesses who were presented, who supposedly could testify as to the need, I find that their testimony was completely inconsistent with one another. And I find it entirely disrespectful that we had to handle this over 2 hearing days because Hobby Lobby took for granted that we would rubber stamp their application and came forward last month with a witness who had absolutely no firsthand credible knowledge of the need for these. That's completely disrespectful. We've been presented with contradictory testimony. We made a request through our experts to do an inspection of Hobby Lobby, which is a reasonable request, which was rejected by Hobby Lobby, which raises serious questions in my mind as to what it is you did not want us to see. And I am wavering as to whether or not this should be approved based on the presentation that was made. Just because you're Hobby Lobby doesn't mean you automatically get this. You have a burden to meet, and I'm not sure you met it through the inconsistent statements of the two fact witnesses. And I'll leave it at that.
Any other members of the board? So seeing none, so basically, this is a variance for, to have the 3 containers. If the board would act favorably, I think the 3 themes that came up and anyone could add in was that this would run with the tenant, that they would come back 1 year from the date of approval of the resolution. So we'll call it May of they'll make application by May of 2022 to the TRC, which is, from Mr. Cohen's standpoint, is our professionals that get together once a week to review it. And if they feel fine, then they would continue allowing it for another year and so forth. And that the owner, the landlord, would send a letter that would be approved by our attorney, board counsel, that acknowledges that if the tenant ever leaves, that they realize that the containers aren't a part of their building, and that they would have to be removed within 30 days.
I have a question or a comment.
Yes, Aaron.
I just heard it in the last, Mr. Schwartz had said that something about not being allowed to see something. This is the first I've heard of anything like that. I would like, I have some more information on what he's referring to.
Sure, Mr. Disco.
The suggestion of the chairman, I had offered to accompany one of the board members to the interior storage area to kind of verify conditions. I think that's what the gist of that was. And that did not happen.
If you let me respond, I can explain that. Because this is a seasonal use, and because that what you look at may not be an indication of what the circumstances are at the time when the Christmas season and the Christmas materials are delivered over a period of time, it may not give a true indication of what is going on in the storage place. So to look at it when we were talking about it a month ago would not have given a good indication of what the issue was. We believe that the best, most accurate explanation of what's going on from that in that storage area was from the district manager, from Ben. We even wanted to bring in the manager, but the manager is only recently hired and didn't have that information. So we brought in the person who was most familiar with the site, who's been there the most often, and could testify as to what the issues is. And that was a better reflection of the circumstances than if you actually went to the site and looked, which would not have given a proper understanding of of what goes on in that storage room during these seasonal times.
Can I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, but Aaron first, because it was Aaron's question.
That's fair.
Yeah, the one thing I don't understand is that was somebody, there were, I guess, Mr. Disco and another board member actually who came to the facilities and were not allowed to look around?
No.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Disco.
No, it was just a verbal request to Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen had I imagine couldn't decide on the spot. He had to take it to the Hobby Lobby people. So ultimately, the board member and I didn't get to see the storage area.
That seems a little odd to me. All right, I have no further comment at this time.
Before I go to Mr. Schwartz, for the record, it was going to be Sharon, not Aaron, Sharon and Mr. Disco to do a site inspection. Go ahead, Mr. Schwartz.
I was just going to add that clearly Mr. Cohen is a skilled attorney, as we have seen over the course of 2 hearing days. And as such, I am confident that with Mr. Crary's testimony, he could have explained adequately what we would have been seen today and how those conditions would have changed. The fact that we were denied the opportunity speaks volumes to me. That especially combined with the first presentation of a witness who should never have been permitted to testify because he was not credible on the issue, period.
Well, I'm going to let the board decide what, you know, if they want to vote. I mean, the three conditions that I've laid out would be what the conditions would be. I think if we go the route of 1 year and the TRC, they can work. And I would implore, if we do approve, Mr. Cohen, the applicant reaches out to Mr. Disco during the crazy times. So that way he can see it for next May in advance and say, okay, well, I was able to do it, as opposed to May. Maybe that's a way of kind of dealing with it. You know, the board relies very heavily on Mr. Disco, as we have for many, many years. So that would probably be a suggestion that may help a little bit. So it's a 1 year thing. And then, you know, when it's the crazy time, like you just said, in October, November, December, Mr. Disco is able to see that and say, so that way when an application is made in May, it's very quickly. And again, application to the TRC, not the planning board, not this body. If Mr. Disco or the board has any concerns, then they would kick it to us, which they very rarely do.
Okay.
Is there a motion based upon, or does anyone have any more discussion for Mr. Schwartz thing, or do they want to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
With
I'll
the three,
second.
so Mr. Weber, Mayor Weber, are you making the motion to approve based upon the three things I outlined, which is runs with the property?
Correct.
12 months.
Amongst what you, Chairman Tiger, has mentioned.
Perfect. And Mr. Huber, do you second based upon that? Sure. Then Ms. Law, will you please do a roll call?
Sure. Mayor Weber,
Yes.
Committeeman Huber,
Yes.
Mr. David Barnett,
Yes.
Mr. Andrew Schwartz,
Despite my misgivings, if I discount the testimony from last time and focus on the planner and Mr. Crary, I do believe that they have barely gotten across the threshold, so I'll vote yes.
Mr. Lawfer,
I will also vote yes, but I just wish I would have had all the information prior to this last 5 minutes.
Mr. Brendel,
Yes, thank you for being in Springfield.
Mr. Wishna,
Well, I'm voting no, and it doesn't matter because the yeses are going to have this, but the hardship absolutely was not proven through any of the testimony. I have no problem with any of the variances, but there was no hardship that was presented. And that has nothing to do with whether or not Springfield is a place that we want you to do business in. The hardship was not proven. I vote no.
Vice Chair Kessel,
Yes.
and Chairman Tiger.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Before we go on to the next application, Aaron, I'm sorry. I probably should have made sure that I asked Mr. Disco that question. So I'm sorry. I probably should have done it at the beginning. That's on me.
No problem.
So the next application, and it's 7:05. So the next application is application 3-2021S. This is Springfield Company LLC 201-225 Morris Avenue, Block 803, Lot 5. If you can pull in the attorney, which is Mrs. Hilaric, but for the record, I'll wait till Clara gets on.
I just want to be clear, we're done, right?
Done. The resolution will be adopted on May.
Okay. Can I just say one thing? I just want to thank the board very, very much, and I mean that. And Jennifer Law, where is she? Is she on here?
Somewhere.
I just want to say she was tremendously helpful. And I do a lot of applications in front of a lot of boards. I got to tell you that I send out an email and 3 minutes later I get a response. And I want to thank you very, very much. And I wanted to know wanted the board to be aware of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Jen's been great for many, many years.
Thank you.
Which is perfect. Okay, so the next application, Mrs. Miller, we have a little bit of a time constraint, which we have to end about 7:20-ish and open up to the public. Obviously, you'll be first on the agenda. If you want to get started so the board can ask some questions, and if there's any things that could be feedback for the next time, that would be great. So I'll turn it over to you to kind of start.
Well, this is the first time hearing that you end at 7:20 though, which doesn't give us an adequate amount of time, but I will start.
Perfect.
Just want to put it on the record that we waited patiently through the other application and didn't expect to be cut short. All right, so I'm Clara Harelick, as you know, appearing on behalf of the applicant owner, which is Springfield Company LLC, which is for variance relief in connection with a freestanding directory sign at the General Green Shopping Center, which, as was stated, is address 201-225 Morris Avenue, block 803, lot 5. And the property is located in the general commercial zone. The specific variance that we are requesting under the land use ordinance in the township of Springfield is for a sign face area variance. Specifically, section 35-31.8B5C regards sign face area for a freestanding sign. The maximum in the GC zone is not to exceed 24 square feet. The proposed sign face area measures 75.7 square feet. It is important to note at this time that there were review letters that were received, and with regard to Keenan Hughes of Phillips Price, he pointed to the fact that there are potential variances for sign lighting and sign depth. As to both, the applicant can bring the sign into compliance without the need for the variances, and there's testimony regarding same tonight. The non-compliance as to depth and lighting was strictly aesthetic, but not necessary. And of course, I did notice that the board, could have any other variances, waivers, exceptions, or what they deem appropriate or necessary. The location of the sign was also raised by Mr. Hughes due to the site triangle. And I want to note here that testimony will be given tonight supporting the location, but that the applicant has no objection to moving the sign out of the site triangle. I want to further note that the sign was originally out of the site triangle and then moved to its current location based on suggestions by the bid. Now, with regard to the bid, I am aware of the significant importance of the bid to the downtown area, as is my client, and of course, with all the redevelopment that is going on down there. So what we did was we provided a copy of a set of plans to the bid for any comments or recommendations before we submitted to the full planning board. And the board, I understand, was provided today with a letter from the bid that was dated from March 17th of 2021, which was based on our plans of February 4th of 2021. As a result of the suggestions, recommendations of the bid, we actually revised our plans, met all of their suggestions and recommendations. And so what we submitted on March 23rd, 2021 to the board represents all of their changes, suggested changes. Now, I would like to call, since we're pressed for time, the following people this evening. First, there's going to be Charles Reed. He is with the applicant owner, the Director of Operations. The next one will be Mr. Smith from DC Signs and Awnings. And finally, Mr. Seckler, who is my licensed professional engineer, professional planner, and professional traffic operations engineer. Now, because we are pressed for time, obviously the most important testimony is that of the planner. So I would say, do you want Mr. Reed to give you an overview from the applicant owner's perspective of why they need this sign, or would you like to go to the planner? I would state that, and I would state this, that the testimony is expected to show tonight that this sign is scaled appropriately based on the number of businesses in the shopping center, based on the setback of the businesses from the roadway, and based on traffic flow. And in addition, in light of the downtown development and redevelopment, the proposed directory sign will be an added benefit to promote business in the area. And especially during these difficult COVID-19 times, we think that that is just one more added benefit for the downtown. And of course, we'll meet the criteria with regard to planning. So that having been said, again, Matt Seckler is probably the most significant testimony. So we could start with the planner if you would like.
Counselor, I'm okay with whoever you want to start with, but I think that the hearing about why they need the sign and the sign person is more important, because I'm sure the planner is going to say all the variances are necessary and the whole thing. So, we need him on the record to hear that, but I think hearing from the owner, plus I know Mr. Disco had some concerns with some property violations that he wanted to make sure they're aware of tonight so they can potentially get resolved in advance or know for the future, I think would be a good way to start. But it's your
And I'd like to call on Mr. Charles Reed Jr., and he is the Director of Operations for Kaufman Company, which is the managing partner for Springfield Company LLC.
Good evening, folks.
Mr. Reed, raise your right hand.
Yes,
Mr.
you have
Reed,
to be
raise your right
sworn
hand.
in, Mr. Reed.
Raise your right hand, Mr. Reed. He froze.
That's the right one.
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth in proceedings before the board tonight, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, Clara.
Thank you, Mr. Keynes. Mr. Reed, if you would, you heard the chairman, please indicate to the board the reason why you're coming before the board with this request for this directory sign.
Well, I'll keep it short and sweet. I've been here before for this. I'm operations director for the Kaufman organization, for the managing partners for the Springfield Company. And I've put Clara and TJ, Matt, and Lee together to present a application to you for the sign for the property. Springfield Company's owned the property for over 50 years. We've always had a pretty decent relationship with the town. The sign has been a repeated request by our tenants year after year. So here we are doing it this year. I think the key reason is, the thing itself is set so far back from the road that it's hard to see. And it's just felt that the sign would just, add an extra presence on Morris Avenue. I don't really have much more than that.
Okay,
I'll
and
leave it to the
Mr. Reed,
experts.
let me just follow that up with one question. So it is your understanding and your belief based on input from the tenants that this would be a benefit to their businesses?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And the shopping center as a whole.
Okay. I mean, I don't really have anything further that Mr. Reed can add regarding the signage.
Perfect. That's fine. Mr. Disco, can you talk through of the property condition and any questions or concerns so that way Mr. Reed's aware?
Sure. There's, I think it was about 10 years ago, if my recollection's correct. The DRC at the time had directed Milton's Liquors to come to the planning board for discussion approval. And at that time, the site was undergoing a transformation. They were doing roofing improvements, but the parking lot was in tremendous need of rehabilitation. I think there was a phased approach developed over the next couple of years to bring the site substantially into conformance with what was desired at the time. So when this application came, we just reviewed that and drove around the site. And from a pavement standpoint, most of the lot is in good to fair condition, other than the lane, the access lane right in front of the depressed curb and kind of the separation of the two main buildings. I don't think it's controversial. It's just an acknowledgement that probably should be something to be incorporated in any motion to correct that and any other safety improvements. That was one. I don't think there was much discrepancy with that. And then there was one thing that the zoning officer had pointed out, which was to get the dumpsters at the rear, the left rear, to get them enclosed, because it's kind of a free-for-all with them now, just exposed. So that's what I would offer to them.
And then Mr. Disco, there was landscaping in the front? Is that part of the?
Yeah, I think Keenan had picked up on that as well, that there could be some landscaping, or there was some dearth of landscaping, and could be some accentuation of that, improvement of that.
Mr. Reed and I had discussed before tonight's hearing the parking lot, and I believe that, Mr. Reed, if you would respond, that the snow and everything this year contributed to that, but that is to be addressed, correct?
Well, Mike, do you want me to respond to all three?
Oh, yeah.
The first one with regard to the parking lot, we do know that we have some sort of underground water condition in that area. Even though the lot is all new, it does get cracked pretty quickly, and it's been, minorly repaired a couple of times. And the snow this year was no help. It did get chopped up a little more. So we have already hired out a big chunk of that and repave it. So that's going to happen fairly quickly. Sorry if I'm breaking up. I have terrible Wi-Fi here.
Okay.
Everybody hear that?
He's
we
gonna
are-
repave
okay.
that spot that's broken up.
Secondly, I don't know if you can, I've brought it up to Bob Herbert before, if it's possible to actually violate the tenants with regard to the dumpsters. They, routinely ignore our demands to put them behind fences. I mean, we don't have contracts with the carting companies. Anyone that we do have a fence behind it. So if that's a possibility, if not, we'll put further pressure on the tenants to enclose their dumpsters. Lastly, the landscaping, which yes has all but disappeared over the past 5 years.
Froze again.
I'm sorry, guys. It's
Can you
terrible
repeat
there.
that?
How's that? I'm kind of on
Better.
I'm on vacation and I'm kind of in a weird spot. So the general partners, we had already planned on doing landscaping around the perimeter of the property, with irrigation and everything to just make it better looking. We had planned to do that in 2020. We would like to do it in 2021, but the property, quite honestly, is suffering right now. We've got an empty anchor. We've only have one tenant paying full rent and a couple of tenants paying no rent at all. So, but it is on our agenda to do. We'd like to get it done this year. So it's something that we will promise you that we'll do.
Maybe we'll come up with like a date, 12 months, 18 months, something on that. We want to be thoughtful, but we want it to, just as you want this nice sign in the front, we want to make it look nice too. So maybe we can come up with a reasonable date. I understand that there are tenants that are not paying and so forth. Okay. Can I open it up to the board members to ask questions? Because I know, unfortunately, and I'm sorry, Counselor, I should have announced in the beginning that we had an issue that we needed to end earlier, but you would have. The good news is our next board meeting is 3 weeks from today, so you will be first. And if the board acts favorably, you'll be able to start the following day per se. We'll do the waiver of the resolution if that's the case. So Mayor Weber.
I don't have any questions at this time on this.
Mr. Brendel?
Nope.
Mr. Huber? Mr. Schwartz?
I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
I'm happy that we'll carry this. So I can have some more time to think about it. This sign, as I'm looking at the renditions that you've sent, man, it just really makes me sad. I think this is a sign for a highway, and to put such a huge obtrusive sign in the middle of our downtown. I've spent, since I've been in office, an enormous amount of time and effort trying to improve our downtown, trying to bring in buildings that have a nice look, certain look to it. I think we've been successful at the building that's being built across the street, and then the one down on Caldwell. We're looking to make a downtown that is more visually pleasing. And one of the things that this board is in charge of, and I think we actually don't think about this responsibility as much as we should, is the character of our neighborhoods. And to me, putting a huge pylon lit sign that looks like it should be on Route 22, and there are ones like an Echo Plaza on Route 22 that look strikingly similar to this. in the middle of our nice, small downtown. It just, every aesthetic bone in my body is just triggered right now. I'm going to have a very hard time understanding how this is necessary, as this building has been there for 50 years, certainly since I've been a kid, going to Arthur's and the other places in there, and how this really fits the character of our downtown. So I would like a lot of testimony about that the next meeting.
Well,
Very hard for me.
and we're going to have the sign guy and the planner, so hopefully we'll get a little more detail on that, and then maybe we'll have someone from the bid, or you're our bid representative. You can.
I'm the bid representative, and honestly, the letter that came from the bid today to me was shocking, given the conversations that we actually had at the bid meeting. So yeah. I have to go back and look at actually how and why that letter was written.
And we have, the good news is there's 3 weeks, so we should be able to button up a lot of stuff by May 3rd.
But I'm really going to need a lot to understand how this, travesty of a sign should be in the middle of our nice, in the middle of a nice downtown that we're trying to build.
Okay, Aaron?
No questions at this time.
Mr. Wishna?
No questions.
Sharon? I think you're there. Can I find you? I don't know what happened, Sharon, but she I'm sure reserves questions for the next time. Mr. Reed, I just have one question. If you can give it, we obviously know New York Sports Club left. I mean, you don't have to disclose, but have you had any tenants? Like, what is your plan for that? If you wouldn't mind.
We're getting interest from gyms.
From gyms.
It lends itself to a gym. It's a gorgeous gym, and there's really not much else we would look to put in there with that super wide opening and the number of air conditioning system on that. So we're it's actively being marketed to gyms.
Okay.
And we've had some feedback, but no bites yet.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm going to open up to the public for any questions for Mr. Reed. Now, there was one question that someone had that said, I have a question about application 2. My name is David Arez of 240 Hillside Avenue. I don't know, Apu, if David is there.
He is.
Can we bring him in now? Yeah, I see him coming up. David, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can. Yep.
Sure. Do you have a question for Mr. Reed?
I do. Hi, this is David Arez, Mr. Reed. I'm the president of the Springfield Presbyterian Church right across the street. And one of the main concerns was really visual impairment of the church, but I was able to get a rendering today, and it doesn't appear that there would be obstructions of the church with the sign. But I'm just curious, I think it was mentioned that there was an alternate location. I'm just curious what the alternate locations were originally for the sign.
I can respond to that for Mr. Arez. Originally, we were about 5 or 6 parking spaces further down toward the Investors Bank Bariatric Center building. And that would put it out of the site triangle. It still would not obstruct the church in any way.
Okay. The second, it's not a question, it's more of a comment. I think it kind of more falls in line with what Mr. Barnett was saying versus about the aesthetics. And this is more for the board and maybe the bid. And
one second, Mr. Harris. Mr. Keynes, does he have to be sworn in if it's not a question? I can't hear you, Glenn. You're on mute.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes, he does. He has to be sworn in.
Sure. Can you swear him in, please?
Wait. You mean the member of the public, Jeff?
Yes.
Well, if you're going to let him testify, I thought he was just asking questions. Normally, we
Okay.
don't swear him in at this point.
Okay. All right. So go ahead.
I'll form it, and I'll make a question out of it. I'll form a question. So regarding the aesthetics and the bid and what's happening in the downtown, who is ensuring that a lot of that aesthetic look and feel is going to be appealing and more uniform, I guess?
So I'll answer that first. That we send this to the bid. Our professional planner is weighs in on comments on that. David Barnett is our board member for the bid. He represents us to get information back. So from what I hear from David's going to spend the next 3 weeks working with the applicant and the bid to figure out what's the appropriate thing from the bid standpoint. Again, the bid doesn't make the decision. The 9 members of this board make the decision, as well as the location of the sign with the applicant. So, but it is our job as the board with information from the bid, Mr. Disco, Mr. Hughes, and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Clara, is that okay? Do you need to answer that? Or is that okay?
I just want to make a quick response to Mr. Barnett, which is that, the bid put out a letter with regard to a set of plans that was provided to them. There was no, strong arming, nothing. We just took their suggestions, and then we ended up changing our plans actually to try to accommodate as a courtesy what their vision was for the downtown. So accordingly, we relied on that letter. We relied on their comments, and to say that it doesn't reflect whatever the board from the bid came up with, I mean, that's something you have internal. That is not something that we had any input with.
So just so you know, the bid doesn't vote on this.
I know that.
I do appreciate you bringing this to the bid. The first proposal you had for this sign was the most atrocious thing I had ever seen. So I do appreciate the work that you and the applicant has done to rein this sign in. My opinion is, no matter what says, and again, this is an aesthetic opinion, I do not believe at this point that what you are presenting here is appropriate for this neighborhood. I think it is too large. I think when it's lit up, it's going to be an eyesore. I've been trying to be very, very careful to maintain the aesthetic. I think the anchoring point of our downtown is the Presbyterian Church. I think it's a beautiful historical building. It's got New Jersey's smallest park right there in front. This property, we know that this property has a history also of not maintaining itself well. The applicant has already said that it is hurting. The landscaping is completely gone. The garbage around the back, the paving, and I'm not holding that against anyone, but at this point, but now to put this huge highway-like sign on a property that's already hurting, I think makes it worse. And I can probably guess what's going to happen with this sign down the road when I see how this property has been maintained over certainly the 50 years that I've been living here. As long as the property owner has made this. I would like to hear I would like to get a lot of information as to why this type of enormous sign needs to be on one of it's a state highway technically, but this is really a local Springfield road. This is the center of our town that we are trying desperately to fix up and to bring a certain type of look and feel to this. And now we have to deal with this big obtrusive sign. So look,
Mr. Barnett,
that's all I have to say this evening.
Yeah, this isn't going to get resolved tonight.
Right.
I'm praying that we have with our professionals. So 3 weeks, we're coming back.
Mr. Tiger, if I may, while that thought is in everybody's minds, I would just like to make one additional comment. I don't think it's fair to state that given a maintenance history, if you will, that means a sign is not going to be maintained. We are here for a sign variance. And I respect the fact that you pointed out certain things in the parking lot, et cetera, that need to be addressed. And the applicant has already said they will be addressed. With regard to the other comment you made, with regard to the lighting is ground lighting is compliant. The height of the sign, 12 feet, is compliant. And I understand that you have a vision aesthetically, but I just want to point out that with the exception of the sign face area, the rest of the sign is compliant.
Okay.
All right.
Counselor-
We'll figure it out next time.
Yeah, at this time, Mr. Reed, what I would ask is if you or some representative could just work with Mr. Disco. I think I get there's a hardship with tenants not paying. So an agreement on landscaping within 18 months or some sort of reasonable time period. I think the only thing pressing from a maintenance issue is the two things of paving the front area, which I think you've said that you would do because that looks pretty bad. I guess it was 10 years ago, the parking lot was in really disarray and you guys did do the right thing over a period of time and clean the parking lot up. So I think from that standpoint, it's fine. And then as far as the dumpster pads, I know the zoning officer is really on it because I know there's garbage blowing around. Maybe we could put our heads together with Mr. Disco. He's very reasonable to see what we can come up with as far as something between now and then. And then Counselor, we'll carry this to May 3rd. The good news is it's only 3 weeks. You'll be first on the agenda. So it's at 6 p.m. Well, you'll be first in the agenda. And obviously, you could bring Mr. Reed back, but I think we could focus more on the sign guy, to kind of hear a little bit about the sign and the placement. If you think between now and then with Mr. Disco, the sign should be slated further back out of the site triangle easement and it doesn't what the bid wants, then we'll have to hear back and forth. I think Mr. Disco has and Mr. Hughes has a big impact on what the board feels and thinks about what they think. So work it out with them between now and the next 3 weeks, which is fine. So I'm going to carry application 3-2021 as with no further notice to May 3rd. No further notice needs to be noticed out to anyone members of the public that has any other questions, please come on May 3rd at 6 p.m. This application will be first besides our meeting minutes and other administrative stuff. And that's it. So I again apologize for the inconvenience. We had a professional that we needed to get to something else. So we'll carry this to May 3rd with no further notice.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to talk to the board about any things that come from this matters before the board? Please raise your hand and speak up. Apu, anyone else on that's?
Seeing none.
Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close this matter to the public and ask for a motion to adjourn till May 3rd.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No one opposes. Thank you, board members. Thank you very much.